fell in love with heavy metal when I was 12 years old. I came home from school, I turned on the television, and the video for Metallica's One came on. I was totally riveted. And it splits between this gritty black and white footage of the band playing in a warehouse and scenes from the movie Johnny Got His Gun, which is about a soldier who loses his limbs and his senses in the Great War. I think a lot of people would just kind of want to turn this off. It's this really dark, brooding, brutal song, and it is a dark, brooding, brutal movie. But I'd like to suggest that that's like turning it off and turning away from it might be the wrong thing to do, because it's about something that's very real and very pressing and has been for a long time. And that is the plight of veterans, the plight of the people who sacrificed their bodies, their minds, their integrity for us. Now, I'm a huge heavy metal fan. I would love to talk to you about metal all day long. But you probably just want to know, well, what do you mean by metal, Peter? It's a genre of rock and roll that emerged in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and really the first metal band is Black Sabbath. They played, and their descendants have gone on to play the loudest, fastest, most aggressive, overdriven, distorted, and often technically virtuosic music that there is. It is overwhelming to hear, and it is about overwhelming things. If you go to a show, the volume is really, really incredible. It will practically move you around. Your ears will ring for days if you don't wear earplugs. And if the music doesn't move you by its sheer force, the crowd probably will, as this surging mob of unified chaos pushes you around. The artwork is in blacks and whites and reds. It signals danger all the time. And the lyrics, which I understand are sometimes like really, really hard to hear, right? If you listen, you read the lyrics, what you'll find is that it's also about power, and sometimes about power in the real world, as the example I just gave you, which means that it's a really good tool for developing social consciousness and a social conscience. Now, metal came about at the height of the Cold War. And right from its very beginning, it addressed the fear that we had of a war of mutually assured destruction. In 1971, Black Sabbath released the album Master of Reality, and on that album is a song called Children of the Grave. And they address atomic fear, and that the atomic fear would be that the children of today would be the children of the grave. 17 years later, Metallica released their album And Justice for All, and the opening track on it is called Blackened. And it begins, "Blackened is the end, winter it will send." And the winter that they're talking about, or in that case, barking about, is a nuclear winter, that were the Soviet Union and the United States to deliver their nuclear payloads on one another, we would end up with a climate and radiation disaster that would, as the band writes, end in the exit of humanity. But it's not just nuclear war. We've had lots and lots of issues over the last 40 years. Let's look at a couple of others. Global trade in the last 40 years has grown exponentially. Global capital moves around at incredible rates, and so do the resources that capital moves. And with all of that movement, all of that development, all of that free trade has come an enormous amount of anxiety. People in developed countries say, "You're stealing our resources. You're taking our livelihoods away from us so that the wealthy and developed nations can be better off." And in our own country, just in the last presidential election, lots of talk about the TPP, for example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, NAFTA coming up, free trade, who wins and who loses? Well, in 1990, the British band Eccentrics wrote a song called For Whose Advantage? And it's a question, for whose advantage? And it begins with this sort of stodgy banker, sorry for the bankers, and it says, it's to their advantage to go into these backward countries, to develop their economies, to utilize and develop their natural resources for the benefit of, and it's this like super kick-ass song, right, that comes after. But the question is, for whose advantage? For whose benefit? In 2003, the United States Congress authorized the use of military force to invade the nation of Iraq. It was a super contentious time. And the Bush administration at the time justified it by saying that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which turned out not to be true, and that we would liberate their people and bring them democracy. Critics said you can't bomb people into democracy, and that really this is a war about oil and a war about American empire. Next year, the band Lamb of God from Richmond, Virginia, writes the album Ashes of the Wake, and on it has this song called Now You've Got Something to Die For, which you can tell is very uplifting. And they say there's bombs to set the people free, blood to feed the Dollar Tree. They talk about the rape of democracy, saying this is not what should be happening. And just lest you think that this is just a bunch of left-wingers bashing right-wingers or something like that, no. Many of you remember the rhetoric of audacious hope that Barack Obama employed in the 2008 presidential election. And his critics said, you have to be kidding me. All this, you can remember Sarah Palin saying, how's that hopey, changey stuff going for you, right? Well, and they would say, this hope stuff, it's empty. And the San Francisco band Frostbitten wrote a song called Hope-Gnosis, in which they say, oh, you promised you'd show us this radiant day, right? And it's total mockery. So the issue isn't about where your politics may be, but that you're addressing power. So I want to turn to one issue in a little bit more detail, because it's a super, super metal issue, and it may be the issue that, according to the World Economic Forum, presents the greatest security and economic threat in the world, and that is human-caused climate change. Now, in 1988, James Hansen, he's a scientist, testified before Congress to say that 1988 was the hottest year on record. People burning fossil fuels are putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, wrapping the Earth in a thicker blanket of greenhouse gases, heating us up, and it's changing the climate. It's dangerous. We should do something about it. Fast forward to 2016, and the World Economic Forum has said climate change, if we do not deal with it, could have the most profound negative impact on the global economy that there is. The US military calls it a threat multiplier. Now, this picture was taken in 2016, and this is a house at on the Ile de Jean Charles, which is a small island off the coast of Louisiana. This house was owned by someone who's quite poor, and there's a good chance that they were also or are an indigenous person. Last year, the United States put aside $48 million to move people from the island to the mainland because rising sea levels caused by climate change are swamping their homes. They are America's first climate refugees. Now, in 1990, the German thrash band Creator wrote a song called When the Sun Burns Red. And they, well, Millie screamed, "No one needs a prophet to explain what's all too clear. Oceans overflowing, islands drowning everywhere." Right? Yeah, Millie's much better at it than I am. But in 1990, that was basically a prediction. It was backed up by science, but we hadn't seen the effects yet. 2016, that's real. And it's not just people who live off the coast of Louisiana, it's small nations like the Maldives. And it's caused by the next problem in large part. The calving of glaciers and the melting of ice caps. Now, actually, just in the last couple of weeks, if you've watched some news, you know that there's a crack in one of the Antarctic ice shelves that lengthened 17 miles in just the course of a couple of months. The rate at which the ice caps of Greenland and Antarctica are melting is faster than previous predictions and is pretty alarming. Now, in 2016, the Boston band, Revocation, I'm wearing a Revocation shirt because I love Revocation, they released their album, Great Is Our Sin, and on it they have a song called Cleaving Giants of Ice. And I'm not going to growl because it just won't work very well. But they say, glacial ablation calving into the sea, frostbitten giants drowning amongst the debris. And then it continues, written in the thaw, the epitaph of all mankind. Now, the epitaph of the Ile de Jean Charles has already been written. It's already, those people are going to have to move. But let's think about a city like Miami, where things called king tides, the floods on a sunny day, can come up and flood the city streets. 3 more feet of sea level rise, 6 more feet. Are we looking at the epitaph of Miami? If all of the ice on the planet melts, and it's over a very long time scale, maybe a few centuries, you're looking at 216 feet of sea level rise. Now, that may not be the epitaph of all mankind, or humankind, I should say. But you're looking at the epitaph of Florida. You're looking at the epitaph of Manhattan. Every coastal city that you can think of, gone. Now, you're probably thinking, oh my God, Peter, geez, like this is just so doomy. And it's true. I mean, yeah, it's super doomy. These folks are harbingers of doom. That's what they do, right? But they're not just harbingers of doom. That can't be where we just leave it and sort of give up, right? They're also voices of consciousness and conscience. And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, we know that those things that are really troubling and really hard, and maybe hard to really listen to, are things that we have to listen to. So I'm going to ask you to tonight or tomorrow, go home, maybe open a browser, pull something up online, and listen to one of these albums, and really, really listen to it. Because I think that what you might find in it is a message about what's really wrong and where you and I might play a constructive role in doing something better. Thank you.